Have you ever met someone who seemed completely confident? Someone who appeared untouchable? Someone who walked into every room as if they owned it? Someone who acted as though criticism meant nothing, rejection had no effect, and vulnerability simply didn't exist? From the outside, it can seem like certain people possess an endless supply of confidence. They appear powerful, certain, unshakable. But what if the very thing that looks like strength is actually protecting something fragile? What if beneath the confidence, the control, and the carefully crafted image lies a weakness that they desperately hope nobody ever discovers? Today, we're exploring the one weak spot a narcissistic woman hopes remains hidden. Because once you understand this hidden vulnerability, many behaviors that once seemed confusing suddenly begin to make sense. Many people see the confidence, charm, and self assurance of a narcissistic woman and assume that what they are seeing is completely authentic. They see someone who appears strong, emotionally untouchable, and unaffected by the opinions of others. The image often looks polished and convincing. Yet beneath that image, there is frequently a level of vulnerability that remains carefully hidden. This hidden vulnerability is one of the most important parts of understanding narcissistic behavior because it explains many reactions that otherwise seem confusing. Every person creates a public image to some degree. We all decide which parts of ourselves to share and which parts to keep private. However, for a narcissistic woman, the gap between the public image and the private emotional reality can become especially large. The image is not simply a way of presenting herself to the world. It often becomes a form of protection. The reason protection is needed is that vulnerability feels dangerous. Vulnerability involves uncertainty. It involves the possibility of rejection, criticism, disappointment, and emotional pain. For many narcissistic individuals, these experiences feel particularly threatening because they challenge the carefully constructed identity that helps them feel secure. As a result, enormous effort may be invested in maintaining a strong and impressive appearance. Strength becomes something that must always be visible. Confidence becomes something that must never disappear. Weakness becomes something that must remain hidden at all costs. The image serves as a shield designed to prevent others from seeing insecurities that exist beneath the surface. This is why emotional openness can often feel difficult. Genuine vulnerability requires admitting fears, doubts, mistakes, and imperfections. It requires allowing another person to see parts of oneself that are not polished or impressive. For someone who has built much of their identity around appearing strong and superior, this can feel extremely uncomfortable. Instead of exposing vulnerabilities directly, they are often concealed behind other behaviors. Arrogance may hide insecurity. Superiority may hide self-doubt. Emotional distance may hide fear. What appears on the surface is not always the complete story. In many cases, the behavior that seems strongest is actually protecting something much more fragile underneath. One of the clearest signs of this hidden vulnerability appears when the image is challenged. As long as admiration is present and things are going smoothly, the protective mask remains intact. But when criticism, rejection, or failure enters the picture, emotional reactions can become surprisingly intense. The reaction is often larger than the situation itself, because the threat is not only to the event being discussed. The threat is to the image that provides emotional security. A simple disagreement may feel like a personal attack. A rejection may feel like proof of inadequacy. A criticism may feel like exposure. These experiences create discomfort because they bring hidden insecurities closer to the surface. The stronger the need to maintain the image, the stronger the reaction may become when that image is threatened. Relationships often reveal this vulnerability more clearly than any other area of life. Close relationships naturally involve emotional exposure. The closer people become, the more difficult it becomes to hide imperfections. Intimacy requires authenticity, and authenticity requires vulnerability. This creates a challenge because the very thing needed for genuine connection is often the thing that feels most dangerous. As a result, there may be attempts to avoid situations that require too much emotional openness. Defensiveness may appear when sensitive topics arise. Blame may replace accountability. Emotional walls may be built to prevent deeper exposure. These behaviors are often misunderstood as pure confidence or indifference, when in reality they may be serving as protection against fears that remain hidden. The most important thing to understand is that vulnerability itself is not weakness. In fact, vulnerability is a normal part of being human. The problem arises when a person becomes so afraid of exposing it that they spend their life hiding behind an image. A narcissistic woman often hopes that others will focus entirely on the confidence, success, beauty, or strength she presents to the world, while never noticing the insecurities that exist beneath it. Yet those insecurities continue influencing thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. They remain quietly present behind the mask, shaping reactions and decisions in ways that are not always obvious. The image may appear powerful, but the vulnerability it protects often reveals a very different emotional reality, built not on complete security, but on a deep desire to avoid being seen in ways that feel uncomfortable, uncertain, or painfully human. Six, at the center of many narcissistic behaviors lies a weakness that is rarely discussed openly and even more rarely acknowledged. It is not a fear of failure alone. It is not simply a fear of rejection. It is not even a fear of losing control, attention, or admiration. Those fears are often symptoms of something deeper. The weak spot that explains so many behaviors is the fear of not being enough. This fear can take many forms. It may appear as the fear of not being attractive enough, successful enough, intelligent enough, admired enough, or important enough. The specific details vary from person to person, but the underlying concern remains remarkably similar. Beneath the confidence, beneath the image, and beneath the need for validation, often exists a quiet fear that if people saw the real person underneath, they might decide that person is not worthy of the admiration being received. This fear is particularly powerful because it threatens something fundamental: identity. A narcissistic woman often invests enormous emotional energy into creating a version of herself that feels strong, desirable, and superior. That image becomes more than a public presentation. It becomes a source of emotional security. The more she relies on that image, the more frightening it becomes to imagine life without it. As a result, many behaviors can be understood as attempts to protect against this fear. The need for validation helps reassure her that she is enough. The desire for control helps prevent situations that might challenge that belief. The pursuit of attention helps maintain a sense of significance. Even reactions to criticism often stem from the same source. The criticism itself may not be the true problem. The real issue is that criticism threatens the image that protects her from confronting deeper insecurities. What makes this fear so difficult is that external success can never fully eliminate it. No amount of praise permanently solves it. No amount of admiration completely removes it. No level of attention guarantees lasting peace. Because the fear originates internally, external validation can only provide temporary relief. For a short time, admiration may create reassurance. For a short time, success may create confidence. But eventually, the need for more reassurance often returns. This is why some narcissistic individuals appear to have an endless appetite for recognition. From the outside, it may seem like they already have enough attention, enough praise, or enough admiration. Yet the internal fear continues searching for confirmation. The underlying question remains unanswered. Am I truly enough? Because that question feels so uncomfortable, the search for validation continues. Relationships often become deeply connected to this weak spot as well. Being loved and admired by someone else can feel like proof of worth. It can provide reassurance that the image being presented is being accepted. But relationships also involve vulnerability. The closer another person gets, the greater the possibility that imperfections will be seen. This creates tension because the desire for validation exists alongside the fear of exposure. As a result, there may be a constant balancing act between wanting admiration and fearing genuine emotional intimacy. Admiration feels safe because it supports the image. Vulnerability feels risky because it reveals the person behind the image. The stronger the fear of not being enough, the harder it becomes to allow others to see beyond the carefully constructed exterior. What many people never realize is that this weak spot often remains hidden even from the narcissistic woman herself. She may not consciously think, I fear I'm not enough. Instead, the fear reveals itself indirectly through behaviors, reactions, and emotional patterns. It appears in the need for attention, It appears in the discomfort with criticism. It appears in the desire to maintain control and importance. These behaviors become ways of avoiding direct contact with the insecurity underneath. In many ways, this single fear connects all the previous points together. The confidence hides it, validation soothes it, control protects it, attention distracts from it, the mask conceals it. Yet, despite all these defenses, it remains present beneath the surface, quietly influencing thoughts, emotions, and decisions. That is why the fear of not being enough can be considered the one weak spot a narcissistic woman hopes no one ever discovers, not because it makes her uniquely flawed, but because it exposes the vulnerability hidden beneath the image. It reveals that behind the appearance of certainty may be someone who is still searching for reassurance, still seeking significance, and still hoping to escape the uncomfortable possibility that the version of herself she works so hard to project may not feel as secure as it appears. Give conclusion of whole speech into 5 long paragraph. Give thank you and goodbye note. As we reach the end of this discussion, one important truth stands out above everything else. The behaviors we see on the surface are often driven by emotional realities that remain hidden underneath. A narcissistic woman may appear exceptionally confident, independent, and self assured, but appearances do not always tell the whole story. The need for admiration, the desire for control, the fear of criticism, and the constant pursuit of significance often point toward vulnerabilities that are carefully protected from public view. Understanding these deeper motivations allows us to move beyond simple labels and gain a clearer understanding of why certain behaviors continue to repeat themselves in relationships and social interactions. Throughout this discussion, we have seen how confidence can sometimes serve as a shield for insecurity rather than evidence of true emotional security. We explored how validation becomes more than appreciation and turns into a source of reassurance. We examined why losing control can feel so threatening and why attention often becomes tied to feelings of worth and significance. These patterns may seem unrelated at first, but they all connect to a deeper emotional need, the desire to feel valuable, accepted, and protected from painful self doubt. When viewed together, these behaviors begin to form a much clearer picture of the emotional forces operating beneath the surface. We also explored the vulnerability hidden behind the carefully maintained image. Many people assume that strength means never feeling insecure, never experiencing fear, and never questioning oneself. Yet genuine strength is not the absence of vulnerability. Real strength comes from accepting vulnerability without allowing it to define who you are. The challenge for many narcissistic individuals is that vulnerability often feels dangerous rather than natural. As a result, they may spend years protecting themselves from exposure while simultaneously seeking the validation and connection that every human being desires. This creates an emotional conflict that can shape many aspects of their behavior. Perhaps the most important lesson is that the fear of not being enough lies at the center of many of these dynamics. The need for validation, the pursuit of importance, the protection of an idealized image, and the discomfort with criticism all become easier to understand when viewed through this lens. The weak spot is not simply insecurity itself. It is the fear that without constant proof of worth, admiration, or significance, the image being presented may no longer feel sustainable. Recognizing this fear does not excuse unhealthy behavior, but it does provide valuable insight into why those behaviors exist and why they can be so difficult to change. Ultimately, understanding these patterns gives us a deeper awareness of human nature itself. It reminds us that people are often more complex than they appear, and that the strongest defenses are sometimes built around the deepest fears. The more we understand the hidden motivations behind behavior, the better equipped we become to navigate relationships with wisdom, clarity, and emotional intelligence. True growth begins when we stop focusing only on what people do and start understanding the emotional realities that drive them to do it. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this discussion. If you found this video valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who may benefit from these insights. Your support helps this channel continue creating meaningful content about psychology, relationships, and personal growth. We truly appreciate your time, your comments, and your continued support. Until next time, take care of yourself. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep seeking deeper understanding. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.